Chen. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. 3 months after my husband's death, the estate lawyer called me with 7 words that shattered my world. Ma'am, you need to see this first. I'm Eleanor Hayes, and at 67 years old, I thought I knew everything about my marriage. 43 years with the same man, 43 years of shared meals, shared bills, shared dreams. I was wrong about all of it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from that Tuesday morning when the phone rang and everything I believed turned to dust. Chapter 1: The Call. The house felt too quiet that morning. 3 months of silence since William's funeral, and I still wasn't used to it. I sat in his old leather chair, the brown one that still smelled faintly of his cologne Old Spice, the same brand he'd worn for decades. My hands sorted through sympathy cards I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Our deepest condolences. William was a wonderful man. He's in a better place now. Were they talking about the same William I'd married, the man who'd promised me forever? The phone rang. I almost didn't answer. Most calls these days were telemarketers or well-meaning neighbors asking if I needed anything. Casseroles, company, someone to check my furnace before winter. Something made me reach for it. Mrs. Hayes, this is Robert Chen, your husband's attorney. I straightened in the chair. We'd already handled the will reading 6 weeks ago. Everything had been straightforward. The house to me. Savings split between me and Daniel, our son. What more could there be? Mr. Chen, hello? Is something wrong with the paperwork? A pause, long enough to make my stomach clench. Mrs. Hayes, I found something in William's papers that requires immediate attention. I need you to come to my office today if possible. What kind of something? Another pause, even longer this time. Ma'am, I'd rather discuss this in person. His voice dropped lower. And Mrs. Hayes, don't mention this call to your son yet. You need to see this first. My hands went cold. In 43 years of marriage, I'd learned to recognize the tone men used when they were about to deliver news that would change everything. The doctor who told me about my mother's cancer. The police officer who came to our door when Daniel wrecked his car at 17. This was that tone. I can be there in 2 hours, I said. I'll be waiting. After he hung up, I sat in William's chair for a long moment. Through the window, I could see our garden, the one I'd planted, weeded, and maintained for 4 decades, while William was too busy with his consulting work. The roses were dying now. I hadn't had the heart to tend them since the funeral. My hands were shaking as I reached for my car keys. Chapter 2: The First Will. Robert Chen's office was in one of those modern buildings downtown, all glass and steel. I'd only been here twice before, once when we'd updated our wills 10 years ago, and again for the reading after William died. The receptionist recognized me. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Chen is expecting you. Go right in. Robert stood when I entered. He was a thin man, maybe 50, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Today, those eyes held something I'd never seen before. Pity. Mrs. Hayes, please sit down. He gestured to the leather chair across from his mahogany desk. Can I get you water, coffee? Just tell me what's going on. He nodded slowly and reached for a manila envelope. My name was written on it in William's familiar handwriting, the same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards, grocery lists, notes left on the kitchen counter. But underneath in red ink were words that made my blood run cold. Private for Eleanor's eyes only. There's more than one will. My voice came out as a whisper. Yes, ma'am. A second will executed just 6 months ago. William came here alone, insisted I keep it in a separate safety deposit box. Robert slid the envelope across the desk. He was very secretive about it. My fingers felt numb as I opened it. Inside was a document with official seals and signatures. The words blurred together as I tried to read. Then one name jumped out at me like a slap across the face. Sarah Bennett. Who is Sarah Bennett? I managed to ask. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. According to this document, she's the primary beneficiary of your husband's estate, the house, the savings accounts, the life insurance policy, everything except a small provision for you. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what he'd just said. That's impossible. William and I have been married for 43 years. Why would he— Mrs. Hayes, there's more. Robert's voice was gentle but firm. This Sarah Bennett has been receiving monthly payments from your husband for the past 16 years. Significant amounts. I have the bank records here." He produced another folder thick with financial statements. My eyes scanned the numbers, not quite believing what I was seeing. $2,200 every month, like clockwork. Transferred to an account I'd never heard of, for 16 years. "How is this possible?" I heard myself say. "I handled our finances. I balanced our checkbooks. It appears William maintained separate accounts you weren't aware of. The money came from a business account tied to his consulting work." My mind reeled. William had retired from his engineering job 8 years ago, but he'd continued doing small consulting projects from home. Extra money for retirement, he'd always said. Money that went straight into our joint savings. Or so I'd thought. "Mr. Chen," my voice was steadier now, though my heart was racing. "I need you to be completely honest with me. In your professional opinion, was my husband planning to leave me?" Robert removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. A gesture I recognized as someone buying time to choose their words carefully. "Mrs. Hayes, based on what I've seen here, the timing of this second will combined with the financial arrangements. Yes, I believe he may have been considering leaving you." The words hit me like physical blows. 16 years. Sarah Bennett had been in our lives for 16 years, and I'd known nothing about her. While I'd been taking care of William through his diabetes diagnosis, his minor heart attack 3 years ago, his struggles with retirement, he'd been supporting another woman. "There's something else," Robert continued quietly. "This address for Sarah Bennett. It's not an apartment. It's a house that William helped purchase." He slid another document across the desk. A deed. William's name was on it as a co-signer for a mortgage on a 3-bedroom house in Riverside, just 20 minutes from our own home. He bought her a house. The down payment was $50,000 paid from one of his consulting accounts. The monthly mortgage payments match exactly with the monthly transfers to her account. I stared at the address. 427 Maple Drive. Such an ordinary address for something that was destroying my entire world. "Mrs. Hayes, are you all right? Can I get you some water?" I realized I'd been holding my breath. "No, thank you. I need to understand. If William died with this second will in place, what does that mean for me?" Robert's expression grew even more somber. "The second will supersedes the first. You would receive a monthly allowance of $1,200 and the right to remain in the house for 1 year. After that, everything transfers to Sarah Bennett. $1,200 a month. After 43 years of marriage. After raising his son. After standing by him through every challenge and celebration. William had valued my life at $1,200 a month. What about Daniel? What does he get in this second will? Your son receives $30,000 and William's tools from the garage. That's all. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Daniel, who'd worshipped his father, who'd named his own son after him, worth $30,000 and some rusty tools. "Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something else. Is this second will legal? Can it be challenged?" "That's exactly what we need to discuss." He leaned forward. "The will itself appears to be legally sound, but there are several irregularities I'd like to investigate further. The timing, the secrecy, the fact that you were completely unaware of these financial arrangements. There may be grounds to contest it." I folded my hands in my lap, forcing myself to think clearly despite the chaos in my mind. What kind of irregularities? Well, for one, the witnesses on this second will are people I don't recognize. They're not my staff, and William specifically requested that I not be present during the signing. He came in after hours. That's highly unusual. Robert paused, choosing his words carefully. Additionally, the fact that he kept this from you while making significant financial commitments, the house mortgage, for instance, could be considered fraudulent misrepresentation. A spark of something fierce ignited in my chest. After 16 years of betrayal, after planning to discard me like unwanted furniture, William might have made a crucial mistake. What do you recommend? First, we need to determine exactly who Sarah Bennett is and what her relationship with your husband was. Second, we need a complete audit of all William's financial accounts. And third, he hesitated. We need to decide whether to inform your son about this situation. The thought of telling Daniel made me feel sick. How do you tell your adult child that his father, the man he idolized, was preparing to abandon his family for another woman? How long do I have to make these decisions? The second will requires probate just like the first. We have several months before anything becomes final. But Mrs. Hayes, I strongly recommend we begin investigating immediately. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with secrets and betrayal. Mr. Chen, I want you to find out everything about Sarah Bennett. Everything. And I don't want Daniel to know about this until I decide how to tell him. Of course, Mrs. Hayes. He walked me to the door. I know this is overwhelming, but you should know that you have options. This isn't over. As I walked back to my car, William's betrayal settled into my bones like a deep winter chill. But underneath the pain, something else was growing. Something that felt dangerous and necessary. For 43 years, I'd been the good wife, the supportive mother, the woman who never made waves. I'd trusted completely and been deceived completely, but William had made one critical error in his planning. He'd died before he could execute his escape plan, leaving behind evidence of his betrayal. And now, for the first time in my life, I was going to fight back. The question was, who exactly was Sarah Bennett, and what had my husband promised her that was worth destroying our family for Tian? Chapter 3, The House on Maple Drive. The drive to Riverside should have taken 20 minutes. I made it in 15, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. 427 Maple Drive. The address had burned itself into my mind during 3 sleepless nights since leaving Robert Chen's office. I'd told myself I was just going to drive by, just to see what kind of house William had helped buy for another woman. I wasn't planning to stop, wasn't planning to confront anyone. I was just a 67-year-old widow trying to understand how her life had become a lie. But as I turned onto Maple Drive, my breath caught in my throat. The house was beautiful, not just nice, beautiful. A craftsman-style home with a wraparound porch, mature oak trees in the front yard, flower boxes under every window overflowing with petunias and marigolds. The kind of house I'd dreamed of when William and I were young and planning our future together. The kind of house he had always said we couldn't afford. I parked 3 houses down, engine running, hands shaking as I stared at what $50,000 of my husband's secret money had purchased. The garage door was open, revealing a silver Honda Civic that looked maybe 2 years old. Another expense I'd known nothing about. A movement on the porch caught my attention. A woman emerged from the front door, and my heart nearly stopped. She was younger than me, maybe 52, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and the kind of naturally tanned skin that spoke of someone who spent time outdoors. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse, comfortable clothes for a day at home. And even from a distance, I could see she was attractive in an effortless way that I'd never been. But what made my blood run cold was what happened next. A teenage girl bounded out of the house behind her, laughing about something. The girl threw her arms around the woman's waist in an affectionate hug. The girl had dark hair like the woman, but her facial features, the shape of her nose, the way she tilted her head when she laughed, she looked exactly like Daniel had at that age. I felt bile rise in my throat as the impossible truth crashed over me. This wasn't just about William having an affair. This wasn't even just about him planning to leave me for another woman. Sarah Bennett had a daughter who was clearly William's child. My husband hadn't just been supporting another woman for 16 years. He'd been supporting another family. The girl looked to be about 16, which meant I did the math with growing horror. William would have started his affair when Daniel was in college, when our own son was struggling to find his place in the world and needed his father's attention. Instead, William had been creating a second family. I watched as Sarah and the girl got into the Honda and backed out of the driveway. Without thinking, I found myself following them at a safe distance. They drove to the local high school where the teenager hopped out with a cheerful wave. Sarah waited until the girl disappeared into the building before driving away. I followed her to a small medical office complex where she parked in a space marked Reserved S. Bennett RN. A nurse. William had fallen in love with a nurse 15 years younger and had given her everything I'd been denied. Sitting in that parking lot watching Sarah walk into her workplace in scrubs covered with cheerful cartoon characters, I felt something inside me break open. Not just heartbreak. Rage. Pure, clean rage that burned away 43 years of being the understanding wife. The woman who never questioned, never demanded, never fought for what she deserved. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with questions that demanded answers. How long had William known about the daughter? Had he been present for her birth, her first steps, her first day of school, while I'd been attending Daniel's college graduation alone because William had claimed he was sick? Had he actually been at his secret daughter's 16th birthday party? Back in my kitchen, I opened the laptop Daniel had bought me for Christmas 2 years ago. I'd barely used it, but suddenly I needed to know everything about Sarah Bennett. It didn't take long to find her on social media. Her Facebook profile was mostly private, but I could see enough. Photos of her with the teenager whose name was Emma, according to the tags. Pictures of family barbecues, school events, vacation trips to places William had always said we couldn't afford to visit. And then I found something that made my hands tremble so violently I nearly dropped the laptop. A photo from Emma's 16th birthday party. Just 3 months ago. A beautiful cake. Balloons. A house full of smiling people. And there in the background, barely visible but unmistakably present, was William. He'd been at his secret daughter's birthday party a week before his heart attack. A week before he'd told me he was too tired for Daniel to visit, that he needed quiet time to rest. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when I found Sarah's nursing license information online. She worked at the Riverside Cardiac Rehabilitation Center, the same center where William had done his therapy after his heart attack 3 years ago. That's where they'd met. While I'd been driving him to appointments twice a week, worried sick about his health, he'd been falling in love with his nurse. I closed the laptop and sat in my empty kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a marriage that had apparently ended years ago without anyone telling me. The phone rang. Daniel. "Hi, Mom. Just checking on you. You sounded strange when I called yesterday." I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window, seeing a woman I no longer recognized. "I'm fine, honey. Just adjusting to everything. Listen, I've been thinking about Dad's things in the garage. I know it's hard, but we should probably start going through them soon. There might be tools I could use, and some of the equipment could be valuable." Tools. In William's secret will, Daniel was inheriting tools and $30,000 while Sarah Bennett got everything else. My son had no idea he'd been written out of his father's life just as completely as I had. "Daniel, can I ask you something? Did your father ever mention anyone named Sarah to you?" A pause. Too long. My mother's intuition kicked in, the same one that had always known when he was lying about broken windows or stolen cookies. "Sarah, no, I don't think so." Why? He was lying. I'd spent 39 years reading his face, and Daniel had never been good at deception. "Oh, I just found some paperwork with that name on it. Probably nothing." "Okay, well, I'll try to come by this weekend to help with the garage if that's all right." After he hung up, I sat in the growing darkness thinking about everything I'd discovered. William hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed Daniel, too. Our son worshipped his father's memory, spoke of him with the kind of reverence reserved for heroes. How could I destroy that? How could I tell him that his father had been planning to abandon us both for a woman 15 years younger and the daughter he'd never known he had? But more than that, how could I let Sarah Bennett inherit everything William and I had built together while she sat in her beautiful house completely unaware that her secret lover had been married to another woman for their entire relationship? Because that's what was becoming clear to me. Sarah's social media showed no indication that she'd known William was married. There were no guilty posts, no references to a complicated relationship. She posted photos of family dinners and school events like a woman who believed she was in a committed, honest relationship. William had lied to both of us. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? Chapter 4. The Son's Betrayal. Daniel arrived on Saturday morning with his usual confidence, whistling as he walked through my front door like he owned the place. At 39, he'd inherited William's tall frame and my stubborn streak, though lately I'd been wondering if stubbornness was the only thing he'd gotten from me. He headed straight for the coffee pot, helping himself like he still lived here. "Morning, Mom. Ready to tackle Dad's stuff." He poured coffee into William's favorite mug, the one that said "World's Greatest Dad," and something twisted in my stomach. "I brought some boxes from work, and I figured we could donate most of it. No point keeping tools that'll just rust in your garage." I watched him take a sip, already planning how to divvy up his father's possessions. "Actually, Daniel, I need to talk to you about something first." "Sure, but can it wait? I promised Jenny I'd be home by 3 to help with Connor's soccer practice." He glanced at his watch. "We should probably start in the garage while it's still cool out there." "Marcus, sit down, please." Something in my voice must have gotten through to him because he finally looked at me. Really looked. I could see him taking in the dark circles under my eyes, the way my hands shook slightly as I reached for my own coffee cup. "Mom, are you okay?" "You look like you haven't been sleeping." "I haven't been." I met his eyes. "There's something about your father. Something I need to tell you." Daniel put down his coffee and leaned forward. For a moment, he looked like the concerned son I'd raised the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard when I was sad. "What is it? Did something happen with the insurance, the house?" I took a deep breath. "Daniel, did your father ever mention anyone named Sarah Bennett to you?" The change in his expression was subtle but unmistakable, a slight tightening around his eyes, a pause that lasted just a heartbeat too long. "Sure, no, I don't think so. Why?" He was lying. I'd spent 39 years reading his face, and that little muscle in his jaw, the same one that used to twitch when he was 7 and claiming he hadn't broken the neighbor's window, was twitching now. "Daniel, I know you're lying to me." His face flushed. "Mom, what are you talking about? I don't know anyone named Sarah." "Your father had another will, a secret will that leaves everything to her. The house, the savings, everything. You get $30,000 in his tools." The words hung in the air between us. Daniel stared at me, and I watched his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like relief. "That's impossible. Dad would never—" "She has a daughter, Daniel, a 16-year-old daughter who looks exactly like you did at that age." Now his face went completely white. He stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. "Mom, you're upset. You're imagining things. Grief can make people—" "I'm not imagining anything." The words came out sharper than I'd intended. "I've seen the bank records. Your father has been sending her $2,200 every month for 16 years. He helped her buy a house. He was at her daughter's birthday party 3 months ago." Daniel began pacing around my small kitchen, running his hands through his hair the way he used to do as a teenager when he was caught in a lie. "Okay, let's say this is true. Let's say Dad had some relationship. That doesn't mean anything legally. You were his wife. You have rights." "So you did know." He stopped pacing. For a long moment, we just looked at each other across the kitchen where I'd made him thousands of meals, helped him with homework, listened to his teenage heartbreaks. "I didn't know everything," he said finally. "But yes, I knew about Sarah." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own son had known about his father's secret life and said nothing, had let me grieve for a man who'd been planning to abandon me. "How long have you known?" Daniel slumped back into his chair, suddenly looking older than his 39 years. "About 5 years. Dad told me when I was going through my divorce. He said," Daniel's voice dropped. "He said sometimes marriages don't work out, and a man has to think about his future." "His future?" The words tasted bitter in my mouth. "What about mine?" "Mom, it wasn't like he was planning to hurt you. He was just unhappy. He felt trapped." "Trapped?" I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised us both. "By what?" "By 43 years of marriage. By the woman who took care of him through his heart attack, his diabetes, his retirement depression." Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. "He said you two had grown apart, that you didn't understand each other anymore." "And what about you, Daniel? Did he tell you that in his secret will you inherit almost nothing?" His face went very still. "What do you mean?" "I mean Sarah gets everything. The house, the life insurance, the savings accounts. Everything we built together. You get $30,000 and whatever tools you want from the garage." I watched the reality sink in, saw his face change as he processed what his father's betrayal meant for his own future. The house Daniel had grown up in, the inheritance he'd been counting on for his own children's education, all of it was going to a woman he'd helped his father deceive me about. That can't be right. Dad promised me. He stopped himself, but it was too late. "Promised you what, Daniel?" Silence. "What did your father promise you?" When he didn't answer, I felt another piece of my world shift and crack. "Daniel, what aren't you telling me?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "He said when he left you for Sarah, I'd get the house. He said you'd be fine, that you could get an apartment somewhere, and I could raise my kids in the house I grew up in." The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock William had given me for our 10th anniversary. I stared at my son, the boy I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through countless illnesses, supported through his own divorce, and realized I was looking at a stranger. "You knew he was planning to leave me, and you said nothing." "Mom, I didn't think he'd actually do it. I thought it was just talk, just him being frustrated with his life. But you were counting on it, weren't you? You were counting on inheriting this house when your father abandoned me." Daniel's silence was answer enough. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. I think you should go. Mom, please. Let me explain. Explain what? That you helped your father plan to destroy my life. That you've spent 5 years lying to my face while looking forward to the day I'd lose my home. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Daniel? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like both the men in my life decided I was disposable. Daniel grabbed my arm as I tried to walk past him. Mom, please. We can fight this. We can contest the will together. You don't have to be alone in this. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. For just a moment, I saw something genuine there. Real fear at the prospect of losing me, too. Together, I pulled my arm free. Like we've been together for the past 5 years while you kept your father's secret. Like we've been together while you both planned my future without consulting me. I was trying to protect you. You were protecting yourself, Daniel. You saw a chance to get something you wanted and you didn't care what it cost me. I walked to the front door and opened it. I want you to leave. Now. Mom, you're making a mistake. You need me. You can't handle this alone. I turned to face him one last time. I've been handling things alone for years, Daniel. I just didn't know it. He stood in my doorway for a long moment and I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how to fix this, how to get back into my good graces so he wouldn't lose everything. What about the garage dad's tools? According to his secret, well, those belong to you anyway, but I wouldn't plan on getting them anytime soon. After he left, I sat in William's chair and cried for the first time since his funeral. Not for him. I was done mourning a man who'd never really loved me. I cried for the family I'd thought I had, for the son I'd raised to be honest and loyal, for the life I'd believed was real. But underneath the tears, something harder was growing. Daniel had made his choice 5 years ago when he decided to side with his father against me. He'd gambled that William's plan would work out in his favor, that he'd end up with the house, and I'd be too broken to fight back. He'd bet wrong. Now I had to decide what to do with that knowledge. My husband had betrayed me. My son had betrayed me. And Sarah Bennett was about to inherit everything I'd worked for while believing she was the only woman William had ever loved. But Sarah didn't know the truth yet. And neither did Emma, the 16-year-old girl who thought her father had been a single man who'd loved her mother enough to buy her a beautiful house. What would happen when they learned that William Hayes had been married to another woman for their entire relationship, that the man they'd mourned as a devoted partner and father had been living a lie that spanned nearly 2 decades? I had a feeling Sarah Bennett and I were going to have a very interesting conversation, and this time I was going to be the one with the power to change someone's life forever. End of Part 1. Chapter 5. The Hidden Compartment. 2 a.m, and I was wandering through my house like a ghost. 3 weeks had passed since I'd discovered the truth. 3 weeks since Daniel had walked out my door with that calculating look in his eyes. 3 weeks of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. I'd been avoiding William's home office since his death. It was a small room off the kitchen where he'd handled his consulting work and our finances. Or at least that's what I'd thought he was doing in there. Now I wondered what other secrets might be hiding behind that closed door. The office smelled like his cologne and old paper. His desk was neat organized the way William had always kept everything. For 43 years I'd respected his privacy, trusted him completely, never questioned what he did behind that door. What a fool I'd been. I started with the obvious places. The top drawer held pens, paper clips, sticky notes. The second drawer contained old tax returns neatly filed by year. The third had instruction manuals for appliances we'd bought a decade ago. Normal, boring, the life of a man with nothing to hide. But when I pulled out the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, I felt something shift. The drawer seemed shorter than it should be, as if there was space behind the files that shouldn't exist. My fingers found a small metal tab tucked behind the back panel. When I pulled it, a false bottom slid away. Inside were 3 manila folders and a small metal lockbox. My hands shook as I lifted out the first folder. It was labeled SB in William's precise handwriting. Sarah Bennett. I opened it and felt the room tilt. 16 years of bank statements. Every single transfer documented in meticulous detail. $200 on the first of every month like clockwork. Never late. Never forgotten. Copies of mortgage documents for 427 Maple Drive. Receipts for gifts. birthday presents for Emma, Christmas gifts, school supplies, dance lessons, a laptop for her 13th birthday. William had kept records of everything he'd given his secret family. But what made my blood run cold were the letters. Dozens of them written in William's hand but never sent. Draft after draft of the same basic message. Eleanor, I've tried to find a way to tell you this gently, but there isn't one. I've fallen in love with someone else. Her name is Sarah, and she has a daughter who feels like my own child. I know this will hurt you, but I can't keep living a lie. I want a divorce. I hope someday you'll understand. William, the letter was dated 8 years ago. 8 years William had been planning to leave me, writing and rewriting his confession, never quite finding the courage to deliver it. I found another version dated 6 years ago, Eleanor. Our marriage has been over for years, even if neither of us wanted to admit it. You deserve someone who can make you happy, and I found someone who makes me feel alive again. I'm filing for divorce. William, and another from 4 years ago. Dear Eleanor, I've been living a double life and I can't do it anymore. There's another woman, Sarah. We have a daughter together. Her name is Emma, and she's beautiful and bright, and I want to be a real father to her, not just someone who visits on weekends. I'm leaving. I'll make sure you're taken care of financially. I'm sorry. William, every letter unsent, every confession unspoken. For 8 years he'd been writing the words, but never had the courage to say them to my face. I set the letters aside and reached for the second folder. It was labeled D.H., Daniel Hayes. Inside were printed emails between William and our son going back 5 years. I read through them with growing horror and rage. From William Hayes to Daniel Hayes. Date March 15th, 2020. Subject re your mother, son. I've made my decision about Sarah. I'm going to ask your mother for a divorce after the holidays. I wanted you to know first because this will affect your inheritance. We need to talk about how to handle this. Call me when you can. Dad, from Daniel Hayes to William Hayes. Date March 15th, 2020. Subject re your mother, Dad. Are you sure about this? Mom's going to be devastated. And what about the house? Dan, from William Hayes to Daniel Hayes. Date March 16th, 2020. Subject re your mother. The house will go to Sarah and Emma. They need security more than your mother does. Eleanor will get the apartment complex we inherited from her parents. That should generate enough rental income for her to live on, around $900 a month. That's plenty for one person. I know this is hard, but I need you to understand. I haven't been happy in years. Your mother and I have grown apart. She doesn't see me anymore, not really. She just goes through the motions. Sarah makes me feel young again. Like I matter. Dad, I stared at the screen. $900 a month. William had planned to leave me with $900 a month while giving Sarah everything else. The apartment complex was 2 small buildings my parents had left me. They were old, always needing repairs. On a good month, they generated maybe $900 in rental income. William had calculated exactly how little he could give me and still sleep at night. I kept reading. From Daniel Hayes to William Hayes. Date March 18th, 2020. Subject re your mother, Dad. What if I contest the divorce settlement? What if I fight for Mom? I love you, but this doesn't feel right. Dan, for a moment my heart lifted. Daniel had considered standing by me. He'd thought about doing the right thing. Then I read William's response. From William Hayes to Daniel Hayes. Date March 18th, 2020. Subject re your mother, Daniel. Then you'll get nothing when I die. I'm redoing my will to reflect my new priorities. You can stand with your mother and receive $30,000, or you can accept my decision and remain my primary heir along with Sarah and Emma. The choice is yours, but make it carefully. This house you grew up in, it could be yours someday, a place to raise Connor, or it could go to someone else entirely. I need to know you're on my side. Dad, from Daniel Hayes to William Hayes. Date March 19th, 2020. Subject re your mother, Dad. I understand. I won't cause problems. Just try to be gentle with Mom when you tell her, okay, Dan, I read that last line 3 times. Try to be gentle with Mom. As if gentleness could soften the blow of 43 years of marriage ending. As if there was a kind way to tell someone their entire life had been a lie. Daniel had known for 5 years. 5 years of holidays together, of Sunday dinners, of phone calls where I'd asked about his father and he'd pretended everything was normal. He'd chosen William's money over my well-being. And now, ironically, he wasn't getting the money anyway. William had lied to him too, leaving him almost nothing in the final will. There was a kind of justice in that. I picked up the third folder labeled Justifications. Inside was what appeared to be William's personal journal. Pages and pages of entries documenting every perceived slight, every moment of unhappiness in our marriage that he'd used to justify his betrayal. November 3rd, 2018, Eleanor was cold to me at dinner tonight. She barely spoke, just asked about my day in that mechanical way she has. She doesn't really see me anymore. I'm just part of the furniture to her. I called Sarah afterward. She actually listened. She asked questions and cared about the answers. The difference is like night and day. I remembered that night. I just found out my best friend Carol had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I'd been in shock, barely able to process the news, and William had been annoyed that I wasn't chatty over dinner. January 15th, 2019. Eleanor fell asleep during the movie again. She works too hard, but she won't listen when I tell her to slow down. She's always been stubborn that way. Sarah would never take me for granted like that. She treasures our time together. That night I'd worked a double shift at the library where I volunteered covering for someone whose child was sick. I'd come home exhausted, and William had wanted to watch some action movie I had no interest in. I'd tried to stay awake, but my body had other ideas. March 22nd, 2019. Eleanor forgot our anniversary dinner. Said she was confused about the date, but I think she just doesn't care anymore. We've been married 40 years, and she couldn't even remember the right day. Sarah would never forget something that important to me. This entry made me want to scream. William had told me our anniversary dinner was Friday. I'd marked it in my calendar, made reservations, bought a new dress. Then on Friday he'd claimed he'd said Saturday all along. That I must have misheard. That my memory was getting bad. I'd apologized. Felt guilty for my mistake. Never realized he'd gaslighted me so he could use it as evidence of my failure as a wife. Page after page of twisted memories. Every human moment, every sign of exhaustion or distraction, or simple humanity rewritten to make me the villain in his story. William hadn't just planned to leave me. He'd spent years constructing a narrative that justified it. He'd needed to believe I'd failed him, because the alternative was admitting he was the one who'd failed us. I set the journal aside and picked up the lockbox. It was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom, because even in his secretiveness, William had been predictable. Inside were legal documents I'd never seen before. Consultations with a divorce attorney dated 2 years ago. Valuations of our house, our savings accounts, even my jewelry. He'd been planning everything down to the last detail. There was also a letter from the attorney dated 6 months before William's death. William, based on our discussions, I strongly advise against the approach you're considering. Transferring assets to a third party before filing for divorce could be considered fraudulent conveyance. If your wife has a competent attorney, she could have those transfers reversed, and you could face serious legal consequences. I understand you're concerned about protecting Sarah and Emma, but there are legal ways to do this that won't expose you to liability. Please call me to discuss alternatives. Best regards, Martin Porter Esca. At the bottom of the letter, William had handwritten a note. What if I die before filing? Would the transfers still be considered fraudulent? My hands shook as I read those words. William hadn't just been planning to leave me. He'd been calculating how to avoid the legal consequences. And this question, this horrible question, suggested something even darker. Had he known about his heart condition? Had he intentionally avoided proper medical care, hoping to die before he had to face me? I thought about the months before his death, how he'd refused to see the cardiologist despite experiencing chest pains, how he'd dismissed my concerns about his diet, his stress levels, his need for exercise, how he'd snapped at me when I'd suggested he needed to take better care of himself. I'd thought he was just being stubborn, but now I wondered if he'd been hoping for a way out that would let him escape without having to look me in the eye and admit what he'd done. The final piece of paper in the lockbox was a handwritten note dated 2 weeks before William's death. If something happens to me, Sarah and Emma will be taken care of. Eleanor will fight it, but she'll lose. Daniel knows the truth and won't help her. My only regret is that I won't be there to see Sarah's face when she realizes she doesn't have to share me anymore. I sat in that chair for hours, surrounded by evidence of my husband's calculated betrayal. This wasn't a man who'd fallen in love and made impulsive decisions. This was a man who'd spent years methodically planning to destroy his family while maintaining a facade of loving devotion. When the sun finally came up, I felt like a different person. The grieving widow was gone, replaced by something harder, smarter, more determined. William thought he'd been clever covering all his bases, manipulating everyone in his life to get what he wanted. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. 10. Chapter 6. The Legal Strategy. By 9 that morning, I was sitting across from Robert Chen again, the lockbox and folders spread across his mahogany desk. "Mrs. Hayes, are you all right?" Robert's face was concerned. "You sounded urgent on the phone." "I found these in William's office. I need you to tell me something, and I need complete honesty." I pushed the divorce attorney's letter across the desk. If William had lived and filed for divorce, would he have been able to keep these assets from me? Robert examined the documents, his expression growing more serious as he read. "Absolutely not." He looked up at me. "These transfers to Sarah Bennett would be considered fraudulent conveyance under California law. Any competent family law attorney would have had them reversed within months. Your husband would have faced significant penalties. And the fact that he died before filing for divorce, that complicates things, but it doesn't make the transfers legal. If we can prove he intended to defraud you of your marital assets, and Mrs. Hayes, these documents prove exactly that we can still challenge them." Robert leaned back in his chair, studying me with new respect. "You've been thorough in your investigation." "I've had a lot of sleepless nights to think." I met his eyes. "Robert, I want you to file whatever papers are necessary to contest William's second will. I want every transfer to Sarah Bennett investigated. And I want to know if Daniel can be held liable as a co-conspirator since he knew about William's plans and helped conceal them." "Mrs. Hayes, are you sure about this? Legal battles can be expensive and emotionally draining. And involving your son? My son chose his side 5 years ago. He chose his father's money over his mother's well-being. Now he can live with the consequences of that choice." Robert nodded slowly. "All right, I'll start drawing up the paperwork today. But I need to ask, what's your ultimate goal here? Full restitution, preventing Sarah Bennett from inheriting, punishing your son?" I thought about that question. What did I want a week ago? I would have said I wanted everything back. Every penny William had given Sarah. The house on Maple Drive, all of it. But now, having seen the evidence of William's manipulation, having read his twisted justifications and calculated plans, I realized something. "I want justice," I said finally. "Not revenge, justice." What's the difference? Revenge would be destroying Sarah and Emma's lives just because I can. Justice is making sure everyone knows the truth about William Hayes, that he wasn't the devoted partner Sarah thought he was, that he wasn't the honorable father Daniel believed in, that he was a man who could plan to destroy the people who loved him and sleep soundly at night. Robert was quiet for a moment. "That's a mature perspective, Mrs. Hayes. Most people in your situation would want blood. I'm 67 years old, Robert. I've learned that the truth is often more devastating than any punishment I could devise." "So what's your plan?" I smiled and it felt sharp, dangerous, nothing like the pleasant expression I'd worn for 43 years. "First, we secure my legal rights, make sure Sarah can't take what's legally mine. Then," I paused, "then I'm going to have a conversation with Sarah Bennett, and I'm going to give her something she doesn't expect." "What's that?" "The truth about the man she loved, all of it, the good, the bad, and the absolutely devastating." Chapter 7. Confronting Sarah. 3 days later, I stood on Sarah Bennett's front porch at 2 in the afternoon, when Emma would be at school and Sarah would be home between shifts. I'd rehearsed what I would say, practiced in the mirror until I could deliver the lines without my voice shaking. But now, with my finger hovering over the doorbell, every word fled my mind. The wind chimes tinkled in the afternoon breeze. The flower boxes were even more beautiful up close, clearly tended by someone who loved gardening, just like I once had before William's betrayal had stolen my joy in simple things. I rang the doorbell. Sarah answered quickly as if she'd been nearby. Up close, she was even prettier than I'd thought. Warm brown eyes, laugh lines that spoke of a woman who smiled often. She wore a simple sundress and an apron dusted with flour. She looked kind, normal, nothing like the home wrecker I'd imagined. "Can I help you?" Her voice was friendly, curious. "Are you Sarah Bennett?" "Yes, I am, and you are." I took a deep breath. "My name is Eleanor Hayes. I think we need to talk about William." The change in her expression was immediate and heartbreaking. Her face lit up with a smile so genuine, so full of love and grief, that I nearly turned around and walked away. Oh my goodness, you knew William. She stepped aside immediately. Please come in. I'm always happy to meet someone who knew him. She ushered me into a living room that felt like a home in a way mine never had. Family photos covered every surface. William was in many of them, smiling at barbecues, helping Emma with homework, pushing her on the swing set in the backyard. But what struck me most was how relaxed he looked, how genuinely happy. This wasn't the careful, measured expression he wore in our family photos. This was real joy. Please sit down. Sarah gestured to a comfortable sofa. Can I get you coffee? I was just baking cookies for Emma's school fundraiser. I perched on the edge of the sofa, surrounded by evidence of the life William had built here. A life I'd known nothing about. Sarah, before we go any further, I need to ask you something. How did you know William? Her smile softened with memory. We met at the cardiac rehab center where I work. He was such a sweet man, so worried about his health, but trying to stay positive. She sat down across from me. He told me he was a widower, that he'd lost his wife several years before, and was trying to figure out how to take care of himself. The words hit me like a slap. He told you he was a widower? Yes, poor thing. He said losing his wife Marie, I think her name was, had been the hardest thing he'd ever gone through. But that meeting me had given him hope again. Sarah's eyes grew misty. He was so good to Emma and me. I can't believe he's gone. Marie. William had named his fictional dead wife Marie, probably because it was close enough to Muriel, my middle name, that he wouldn't slip up in conversation. I felt sick, not just because of William's lie, but because of the genuine love in Sarah's voice. Whatever else he'd done, William had clearly made this woman and her daughter very happy. Sarah, how long were you and William together? 16 wonderful years. We weren't married officially. He said he wasn't ready for that step after losing Marie. But we were committed to each other. He was Emma's real father, in every way that mattered. 16 years. Emma's entire life. William had been playing house with this woman while I'd been at home believing we had a solid marriage. Did he ever talk about his first wife? Sarah nodded sadly. Sometimes. He said she'd died in a car accident, that he felt guilty about moving on, about being happy again. I tried to tell him that Marie would have wanted him to find love, but he carried that grief for a long time. A car accident. So much easier than the truth that his dead wife was very much alive and living 20 minutes away. Sarah, my voice was steady now, though my heart was racing. I need to tell you something, and it's going to be very difficult to hear. Something in my tone must have alarmed her, because her smile faded. What is it? Is something wrong? Did William owe money to someone? I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope. William wasn't a widower. He was married to me for 43 years. Sarah stared at the papers I handed her, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and growing horror as she processed what she was reading. Our marriage certificate dated 1982, bank statements showing the monthly transfers to her account, the deed to this house with both their names on it. This can't be right. Her hands trembled. William would never, he wasn't the kind of man who would lie about something like that. He was Sarah. I'm sorry, but he was. She stood up abruptly and began pacing, much like Daniel had done in my kitchen. But where Daniel had been defensive, Sarah looked shattered. This is impossible. We lived together, planned our future together. He was here for Emma's birth, her first steps every birthday, every school play. How could he have another life? How could I not have known? He was very careful. He told me his consulting work required travel, sometimes overnight trips. He said he was working with clients in different cities. Sarah sank back onto the sofa, her face pale. All those years. He was lying to me every single day. I nodded, watching this woman's world crumble the same way mine had a few weeks earlier. Sarah, there's something else. William made a new will 6 months before he died. He left everything to you and Emma. His house, his savings, his life insurance. Everything. But you're his wife. How can that be legal? I don't know yet. My lawyer is looking into it. But Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did William ever give you any indication that he might be married? Any phone calls he took in private? Any times when he seemed secretive? Sarah was quiet for a long time, thinking. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and uncertain. There were things, little things that never quite made sense. He never wanted to take trips during certain times of year, holidays, anniversaries. He said he got too emotional remembering Marie during those times. What else? He never let Emma or me visit his house. He said it was too painful that he'd kept it exactly like it was when Marie was alive, that walking through those rooms was like walking through a museum of his grief. Those would have been the times William was with me, our holidays, our anniversaries, our real life. And sometimes, Sarah continued, he would get phone calls that he'd take outside. He said it was work, but he always seemed stressed afterward. Those were calls from me, from Daniel our son, from our real life intruding on his fantasy. The front door opened and Emma bounded in with the energy of a teenager coming home from school. She stopped short when she saw me sitting with her mother, both of us clearly upset. "Mom, what's wrong? Who's this?" Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, trying to compose herself. "Emma, this is Eleanor. She was a friend of William's." Emma's face brightened immediately. "Really? Did you know my dad well? Mom doesn't get to talk to many people who knew him." I looked at this beautiful 16-year-old girl with William's eyes and Daniel's smile and felt my heart break for her. Emma had no idea that her entire life was built on a lie, that the father she'd adored had been living a double life since the day she was born. "I knew him for a very long time," I said carefully. "Wasn't he the best?" Emma's enthusiasm was infectious. "He was so funny and smart, and he always had time for me no matter how busy he was with work. I really miss him." Sarah stood up quickly. "Emma, honey, why don't you go start your homework? Eleanor and I are just finishing up." After Emma disappeared upstairs, Sarah turned back to me, her expression harder than it had been before. "What do you want from me, from us? Are you here to take our house, to destroy what little we have left of him?" I looked around the living room again, at all the photos of the family William had chosen over the one he'd been born into, at the evidence of 16 years of love and lies. "Sarah, I honestly don't know what I want yet. But I think you deserve to know the truth about the man you loved, and I think Emma deserves to know the truth about her father." "You can't tell her." Sarah's voice was desperate. "Please, she just lost him. She worships his memory. This would destroy her." "The way it destroyed me when I found out—" Sarah had no answer for that. "I'm not here to destroy you, Sarah, but I won't lie to protect William's memory either. Not anymore." I stood to leave, gathering my purse and the envelope. "I'll be in touch through my lawyer about the financial arrangements. But Sarah," I paused at the door, "you should know something. William didn't just betray me. He betrayed you too. Because the man you loved, the devoted father and faithful partner, that man didn't exist. He was a character William played when he was here. And eventually, if he'd lived long enough, you would have become the wife he complained about, and some other woman would have become his escape." Sarah stared at me, tears streaming down her face. "How do you know that?" "Because I found his journals. 16 years of entries where he documented every small thing I did that annoyed him. Every human moment twisted into evidence of my failure. He was building a case against me, Sarah, just like he would have eventually built one against you. Because that's who William Hayes was, a man who could never be satisfied with real life. He always needed a fantasy to run to." I left her sitting in her beautiful living room, surrounded by the lies she'd lived for 16 years. As I drove home, I thought about what I'd learned. Sarah hadn't just betrayed me, she'd been betrayed too. She'd spent 16 years loving a man who didn't exist, raising a daughter with a father who was living a complete fiction. But she'd also gotten 16 years of happiness, of feeling loved and chosen. 16 years of William at his best, freed from the responsibilities and disappointments of his real life. I'd gotten 43 years of William at his most ordinary, his most tired, his most resentful. I'd gotten the man who felt trapped, while Sarah had gotten the man who felt free. The question now was, what was I going to do with all this knowledge? Chapter 8, The Deeper Truth. 3 days after my confrontation with Sarah, Robert Chen called with news. "Mrs. Hayes, my investigator found something that changes everything." "What is it, so? Can you come to my office? This needs to be discussed in person." An hour later, I was sitting across from Robert again, my stomach in knots. "Mrs. Hayes, there's something that doesn't add up in Sarah Bennett's story." Robert opened a folder on his desk. "She told you she met William at the cardiac rehab center where she works, correct?" "Yes, after his heart attack 3 years ago." "That's what I thought. But my investigator checked Sarah's employment records. She only started working at that rehab center 3 years ago. But Emma is 16. The implications hit me slowly. Then how did they meet? Robert pulled out more documents. Sarah Bennett's real name is Sarah Blackwood. She changed it legally 14 years ago after her divorce from her first husband. He slid a photograph across the desk. A wedding photo from the late 1990s. Sarah younger and radiant, standing next to a tall man in a tuxedo. James Bennett. He was an engineer. He worked at the same company as William from 1998 to 2005. My mouth went dry. They knew each other before. They were colleagues. According to people I interviewed who worked there, James and William were friends. They socialized together. Sarah would have met William at company events while she was still married to James. Robert pulled out another document. This is Emma's birth certificate, Father James Bennett. But 3 months after Emma was born, James and Sarah divorced. The settlement included a large one-time payment from a third party. William, we can't prove it definitively, but the timing is suggestive. And Mrs. Hayes, I found something else. He pulled out printed emails, old and faded. These were in William's archived work email. The IT department at his old company was able to retrieve them. From William Hayes to Sarah Blackwood, date June 12, 2009. Subject redecision. Sarah, I spoke to a lawyer today. If I file for divorce, Eleanor will get half of everything. The house, the retirement accounts, everything. And with my salary, I'd be paying alimony for years. I can't do it. Not yet. Not when it would leave Emma with nothing. I promise I'll figure something out. Just give me time. W. From Sarah Blackwood to William Hayes. Date June 13, 2009. Subject redecision. William. I understand. I do. But I can't keep living like this, waiting for you to leave a wife you claim you don't love. Emma deserves a father who's fully present, not someone who has to sneak around to see her. If you can't leave Eleanor, then at least help me financially. James is barely paying child support, and I can't work full-time with Emma so young. I love you. But I need more than promises. S. From William Hayes to Sarah Blackwood. Date June 14, 2009. Subject redecision. Sarah, I'll send you $2,000 a month from my consulting account so Eleanor won't see it. And when Emma is older, when the timing is better, I'll leave. I promise. Just please don't give up on us. W. I stared at the emails, my mind reeling. Sarah knew, I said slowly. From the beginning, she knew William was married. It appears so, and Mrs. Hayes, there's more. Robert pulled out another document. The house on Maple Drive. It wasn't purchased 6 months ago. William bought it 12 years ago when Emma was 4. He's been paying the mortgage all this time. Sarah's been living there for over a decade. But the deed showed it was restructured 6 months ago, probably when William made his new will. He wanted to make sure Sarah had clear title to the property. Robert leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Hayes, I think Sarah Bennett has been playing the role of the innocent mistress, but the evidence suggests she's known about you all along. She pressured William for financial support, for the house, for a commitment he couldn't fully give because he was already married. I thought about Sarah's tears, her shock when I'd told her about our marriage. Had it all been an act, or had she convinced herself of her own lies, spent 16 years pretending William was free so she didn't have to face what she'd done? What does this mean for the case? It means Sarah Bennett was a knowing participant in hiding marital assets. It strengthens our position significantly. We can argue that she conspired with William to defraud you. And Emma? Robert's expression softened. Emma is innocent in all this. She was a child. Whatever her parents did, it wasn't her fault. I sat in silence, processing everything. Sarah wasn't the naive victim I'd imagined. She was a woman who'd made a choice 16 years ago to be with a married man, who'd pushed him for money, for security, for the trappings of commitment, even though she knew he had a wife. But she'd also spent 16 years waiting, hoping, believing William's promises that someday, somehow he'd leave me for her. He never had. And now I understood why. William had never planned to leave me, not really, because leaving would have required courage, honesty, facing the consequences of his choices. It was so much easier to maintain 2 lives, to be the trapped husband at home and the devoted lover away, to promise Sarah someday, while never actually taking the steps to make it happen. The new will wasn't a plan to leave me. It was a backup plan, a way to ensure Sarah got what she wanted if he died before he had to face the truth. Robert, I said slowly, I want to change our strategy. What do you mean? I don't want to destroy Sarah. I don't want to take her house or leave her and Emma with nothing. Mrs. Hayes, but I want her to know the truth, the full truth, about what William really thought of her, about how he complained about her just like he complained about me, about how he was planning his escape from her, too. I pulled out the journal entries I'd found in William's office, the ones where he'd complained about Sarah's weight gain, her neediness, her demands. I want Sarah Bennett to understand something. William Hayes didn't love either of us. He loved the fantasy, the escape, the feeling of being wanted. And the moment that became work, the moment real life intruded, he would have looked for the next escape. Robert studied me carefully. This isn't about revenge, is it? Oh. No, I said. It's about the truth. Sarah spent 16 years believing a lie. She deserves to know what she was really part of. Not so I can punish her, but so she can finally see clearly. So she can stop mourning a man who never existed and start building a life based on reality. That's a very generous interpretation, Mrs. Hayes. I'm 67 years old, Robert. I've learned that the truth is the greatest gift you can give someone, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Chapter 9, The Final Confrontation. I asked Sarah to meet me one last time before the legal settlement was finalized. She agreed warily, probably expecting me to gloat or make demands. Instead, I brought her a gift. We sat at her kitchen table, the same place where I'd first revealed William's marriage. But this time, Emma was at a friend's house. This conversation was for adults only. Why are you here, Eleanor? Sarah's voice was tired, defeated. Your lawyer says you're not going to take the house, that you're offering a settlement that lets us stay. So what do you want? I placed a manila envelope on the table between us. I want you to have these. What are they? Copies of letters William wrote but never sent. Letters where he planned how to leave me for you, but also letters where he complained about you, Sarah, where he called you demanding, where he worried about how expensive Emma was becoming, where he wondered if he'd made a mistake. Sarah's face went pale. No, William never read them. With shaking hands, she pulled out the first letter. March 3rd, 2021. Sarah is getting more insistent about setting a date to tell Eleanor. She doesn't understand how complicated this is, how much I have to lose. Eleanor never pressures me like this. She's content with what we have. Why can't Sarah be satisfied? Maybe I've made a mistake. Maybe I've traded one set of problems for another. Sarah's hands trembled as she read. I pulled out more pages. Journal entries William had never meant for anyone to see. July 15th, 2020. Sarah has gained weight since Emma was born. I try not to notice, but I catch myself comparing her to how Eleanor looked at that age. Eleanor kept herself up, even after Daniel. November 22nd, 2021. Sarah wants me to come to her work Christmas party. Says it looks suspicious that I never attend her work functions. How can I explain without telling her the truth that I can't risk running into someone who knows Eleanor? This is getting harder. The lies are piling up. Sometimes I wonder if it would be easier to just end it with Sarah. But Emma, I can't abandon Emma. February 8th, 2022. I saw the checkout girl at the grocery store today. Young, probably mid-20s. She smiled at me. Really smiled, not the tired half-smile I get from Eleanor, or the expectant look I get from Sarah. It made me wonder what it would be like to start fresh. No obligations, no history, just possibility. Sarah was crying now, reading entry after entry that revealed William's true thoughts. His wandering eye, his resentment of her expectations, his doubts about their relationship. Why are you showing me this? She whispered. Isn't it enough that you've won that you're taking back what's yours? I'm showing you this because I want you to understand something, Sarah. William didn't leave me because I failed him, and he didn't stay with you because you were perfect. He left me because he was selfish, and he would have eventually left you too. That's who he was. I leaned forward, my voice gentle but firm. The William you loved, the devoted father and faithful partner that man existed because you didn't know about me. The moment you became his real life instead of his escape, he would have started looking for a new escape. You would have become the wife he complained about in his diary, and some other woman would have become his salvation. Sarah was silent for a long time, tears streaming down her face. You're wrong, she said finally. William loved me. He loved Emma. I know he did. I'm sure he did in his way. But Sarah love wasn't enough for William. It never was. He needed the fantasy, the escape, the feeling of being wanted without the work of being present. And that's not love. That's addiction. I pulled out one more document. The letter from William's divorce attorney warning him about fraudulent conveyance, and William's handwritten note. What if I die before filing? William was planning an escape route, Sarah. Not just from me, from responsibility, from consequences, from having to face what he'd done. And I think somewhere deep down you knew that. That's why you kept pushing for more commitment, more security. Because you knew he was never really yours. Sarah stared at the note for a long moment. Then something seemed to break inside her. She put her head in her hands and sobbed deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. I knew, she whispered between sobs. I knew he was married when we started. James told me. He said William was his friend, that I was crazy to trust him. But William was so charming, so attentive, and I was lonely. James and I were already falling apart, and William made me feel special. She looked up at me, her face ravaged by tears. I told myself it was okay because he was unhappy with you, because he was going to leave anyway. I told myself I was saving him from a loveless marriage, that we were meant to be together. And then 16 years went by and he never left. He always had a reason. The timing wasn't right. Daniel needed him. You were going through something. Emma was too young. There was always something. Sarah wiped her eyes. I started to realize about 5 years ago that he was never going to leave you, that I was the other woman and I always would be. But by then, Emma thought he was her father, and I loved him. So I stayed, and I waited, and I hoped. And then he died and you thought you'd finally won. I thought, Sarah's voice broke. I thought at least I'd have this. The house, some security, some acknowledgement that I mattered, that all those years meant something. I reached across the table and took her hand. She looked startled but didn't pull away. Sarah, you did matter. To Emma, to yourself, but not because of William. Your value doesn't come from being chosen by a man who couldn't choose anyone fully. It comes from you, from the mother you've been to Emma, from the life you've built despite everything. I don't know how to tell her, Sarah whispered. About you, about William. She thinks he was perfect. Tell her the truth, that he was human, that he made mistakes, that he loved her, but he also hurt people. That's the greatest gift you can give her, the knowledge that people are complicated, that love isn't always pure, that we have to choose carefully who we give our hearts to. Sarah nodded slowly. What happens now? Now you and Emma stay in this house. My lawyer will arrange a settlement that gives you some financial security, not as much as William promised, but enough. And we both move forward with the truth instead of living in William's lies. Why are you being kind to me? I slept with your husband for 16 years. Because we're both victims of the same man, Sarah. He lied to you just as much as he lied to me. And because Emma is innocent. And because punishing you won't give me back the 43 years I lost. I stood to leave. Sarah, one more thing. William kept a journal entry from 2 weeks before he died. He wrote that his only regret was that he wouldn't be there to see your face when you realized you didn't have to share him anymore. Sarah's face crumpled. He thought you'd be happy he was dead. That's how little he understood what he'd done to us. To you, to me, to our children. He thought his death would solve everything when really it just revealed the truth. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. You spent 16 years of your life loving a version of William Hayes that didn't exist. Don't spend another day mourning him. Emma needs you to be strong, to be real, to show her what it means to move forward from betrayal. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally let go. Of William. Of the marriage I'd thought we had. Of the need for revenge. Sarah would live in her house, but every room would remind her of the lies she'd lived. That was justice enough. Chapter 10, Marcus's Reckoning. 3 weeks after my final meeting with Sarah, Robert Chen called with news that made my heart sink. Mrs. Hayes, I wanted to give you a heads up before you hear it from anyone else. Daniel has hired an attorney. He's planning to contest our settlement with Sarah Bennett. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar ache of disappointment that came whenever I thought about my son. On what grounds? He's claiming that as William's biological child, he has a right to a larger share of the estate. He's arguing that Sarah and Emma shouldn't receive anything since they were the product of an extramarital affair. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Daniel, who'd known about Sarah for 5 years and said nothing, was now trying to profit from their pain. What do you recommend? Honestly, let him try. His case is weak, and it'll cost him more in legal fees than he'd gain. But Mrs. Hayes... Robert paused. This is going to get ugly. Family court cases always do. Are you prepared for that? I've been prepared since the day I found out my husband and son both betrayed me. Daniel made his choice. Now he gets to live with it. That evening, Daniel showed up at my door. I'd been expecting it. He stood on my porch, looking haggard and desperate in a way I'd never seen before. His expensive suit was rumpled. His eyes were bloodshot. This wasn't the confident man who'd walked through my door 6 weeks ago, planning to divide up his father's tools. This was someone who'd realized he'd lost everything. Mom, we need to talk. I have nothing to say to you, Daniel. Please, just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat in the living room, the one I'd redecorated after finding out about William's betrayal. New paint, new furniture, new everything that didn't carry memories of the man who'd lived here under false pretenses. Daniel looked around, noticing the changes. You've been busy. I've been healing. Mom, I heard you're settling with Sarah Bennett, that you're letting her keep the house. That's right. But that house should be part of Dad's estate. It should be divided among his actual family. Me, you, not some woman he had an affair with. I studied my son carefully. You mean it should go to you? I'm his son. I have rights. Rights you were willing to give up 5 years ago when William promised you this house if you'd stay silent about his plans. Daniel flushed. That was different. How I thought He stopped, running his hands through his hair. I thought Dad knew what he was doing, that he had a plan. I didn't realize he was going to leave me with nothing. So you're not upset that your father betrayed me. You're upset that he betrayed you. That's not fair, Mom. Isn't it? I leaned forward. Daniel, you knew for 5 years that your father was planning to abandon me. You sat at my table for Thanksgiving dinners. You called me on Mother's Day. You let me believe we were a family. And all the while you were counting on getting this house when I lost mine. I didn't want you to get hurt. You wanted me not to know. That's different from not wanting me to get hurt. If you'd truly cared about my pain, you would have warned me. You would have told me what William was planning. But you didn't, because you were more concerned about your inheritance than my well-being. Daniel stood up, pacing the room. So what, you're going to punish me forever? I'm your son, Mom. Your only child. My only child who chose his father's money over his mother's dignity. I made a mistake. His voice rose. I was stupid and selfish, and I'm sorry, okay? But you're going to let Sarah Bennett, a woman who slept with your husband for 16 years, keep a house worth $500,000 while your own son gets nothing. Sarah Bennett spent 16 years believing William's lies. She thought he was a widower. She raised his daughter thinking she was building a life with a man who was free to love her. She knew. Daniel's voice was flat. Come on, Mom. Nobody is that naive. She knew Dad was married and she didn't care because she wanted his money. Actually, you're right. She did know. I found emails proving it. Sarah knew William was married when their affair started. Daniel's face lit up. See, then why are you protecting her? She's as guilty as Dad was. Because Sarah Bennett also spent 16 years waiting for William to leave me. 16 years of promises that never came true. 16 years of being the other woman, never quite enough to make him choose her over his comfortable life. I stood up, facing my son directly. Sarah made terrible choices, but she paid for them. Every day for 16 years she paid for them. And now she's living in a house that will always remind her of the lie she lived. And what about me? Daniel's voice cracked. What about the son who loved his father, who thought his father was a good man? Don't I deserve something for having that ripped away? For the first time since he'd arrived, I felt a flicker of compassion for him, because in that moment I heard the little boy he'd been, the one who'd worshipped William, who'd tried to be just like him. Daniel, sit down. He did, looking wary. Your father wasn't a good man. He was a selfish man who hurt everyone who loved him. But you know what? You're not him. You don't have to be him. What are you talking about? 5 years ago, your father gave you a choice. Stand with your mother or stand with him. You chose him because you thought it was the smart choice. The choice that would benefit you most. I sat down next to him close enough that he couldn't avoid my eyes. I'm giving you a different choice now. You can keep fighting for money you don't deserve. You can hire lawyers and drag this family through court and try to take from Sarah and Emma a 16-year-old girl who just lost her father. Or you can choose differently this time. You can choose to be better than William was. What does that even mean? It means accepting that you made mistakes, that you hurt me, that you have to live with the consequences of those choices. But it also means moving forward, building a relationship with your mother based on honesty instead of lies, showing Connor what it means to take responsibility for your actions. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was small. What if I can't afford to drop the lawsuit? My lawyer wants a retainer I can barely pay. I almost laughed. Of course, this wasn't about principle. It was about money. It had always been about money. Then drop the lawsuit and stop throwing good money after bad. Daniel, you're 39 years old. You have a good job, a son who needs you, a life ahead of you. Stop trying to profit from your father's betrayal and start building something real. It's easy for you to say. You're getting the house, the savings, everything. I'm getting what was legally mine all along, what William tried to steal from me. That's not winning, Daniel. That's justice. I stood up and walked to the desk in the corner. From the drawer, I pulled out an envelope I'd prepared weeks ago, knowing this conversation would come eventually. This is the trust fund I'm setting up for Connor. It will pay for his college education, his first car, a down payment on a house someday. It's managed by Robert Chen, not you. You won't be able to touch it. Daniel stared at the envelope. Why would you do this for Connor after everything I've done? Because Connor is innocent. Because he's my grandson and I love him. And because I want him to have opportunities that don't depend on his father's or grandfather's choices. Tears started rolling down Daniel's face. Real tears, not the calculated emotion of someone trying to manipulate me. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. No, you don't. But that's the thing about love, Daniel. It's not always about what we deserve. Sometimes it's about choosing to give grace when someone doesn't deserve it. I sat back down next to him. But here's what I need from you. I need you to drop the lawsuit against Sarah. I need you to accept that your father made choices that hurt all of us. And I need you to stop trying to profit from other people's pain. And if I do that, then maybe eventually we can rebuild our relationship. Not the one we had before that was built on lies, but something new, something honest, something real. Daniel wiped his eyes. I'm so sorry, Mom, for all of it. I should have told you about Sarah. I should have protected you instead of protecting my inheritance. I was a coward. Yes, you were, but you're still my son, and if you're willing to do the work, I'm willing to try. He nodded, unable to speak. Now go home to Jenny and Connor. Talk to your wife about what happened. Be honest with her about your mistakes. And Daniel, yeah, be the father to Connor that William never was to you. Be present. Be honest. Be there for the hard conversations, not just the easy moments. After Daniel left, I sat in the quiet house and thought about grace, about forgiveness, about the difference between enabling bad behavior and offering someone a path to redemption. Daniel had hurt me deeply, but he was still my son, and unlike William, he'd shown genuine remorse. Whether that remorse would translate into changed behavior remained to be seen, but I'd given him the chance. That was all I could do, Bed. Chapter 11, The Unveiling. 6 months after William's death, the legal battles were finally settled. The house was officially legally completely mine. The savings accounts had been restored to my name. Sarah had agreed to repay the money William had taken from our joint accounts over the years, not all at once, but in manageable monthly payments that wouldn't leave her and Emma destitute. In return, she kept the house on Maple Drive and a modest monthly allowance from William's life insurance policy. Enough to live on, but not the windfall William had promised her. Daniel had dropped his lawsuit. He'd even apologized to Sarah, though the meeting had been awkward and painful for everyone involved. I'd changed everything in my house. New paint in every room, new furniture in the living room. William's office had been transformed into a reading room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable chairs, and plants that thrived in the southern light. There was no trace left of the man who'd once sat in that office planning my destruction. But the biggest change wasn't in my house. It was in me. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror one morning looking at a woman I barely recognized. Not because I looked different, though I'd lost weight from stress and sleepless nights, but because I felt different. For 43 years, I'd been Mrs. William Hayes, the good wife, the understanding mother, the woman who made everyone else comfortable, even at the expense of her own comfort. That woman was gone. In her place was Eleanor Hayes, just Eleanor, a woman who'd survived betrayal and come out stronger, who'd faced difficult truths and chose justice over revenge, who'd learned that you could be kind without being weak generous, without being foolish. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, I found myself face to face with Emma Bennett. She stood on my porch, 16 years old and clearly nervous, clutching a small box wrapped in plain paper. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Emma. Can I talk to you?" I'd wondered when this moment would come. Sarah had told me during one of our necessary phone calls about the settlement that she'd finally told Emma the truth about William, about me, about everything. I stepped aside. "Come in." Emma entered hesitantly, looking around at the house that had been her father's real home, the home she'd never been allowed to visit. "Can I get you something, water, tea?" "No, thank you. I won't stay long." She perched on the edge of the sofa, still clutching the box. I needed to meet you, to see the woman my father was married to." I sat down across from her, giving her space. "Your mother told you everything." "Yes, 2 months ago. I didn't believe her at first. I thought she was lying or confused or—" Emma's voice broke. "But then she showed me the papers, the marriage certificate, the bank records, everything. I'm sorry you had to learn the truth that way." "Are you—" Emma's voice held an edge. "Because my mom says you could have kept it secret, that you didn't have to tell anyone, but you did. And now my whole life is a lie." The anger in her voice was understandable, expected even. "Emma, your life isn't a lie. Your mother loves you. William loved you. He wasn't even my real father." The words burst out of her. "My biological father is some guy named James Bennett who wanted nothing to do with me, and the man I called Dad for 16 years was lying to me every single day. That doesn't mean he didn't love you. How can you say that? He lied to you too. He was planning to leave you. Why are you defending him?" I thought about that question. Why was I defending William to his daughter? "I'm not defending what he did. What your father did was wrong, cruel, inexcusable. But Emma, people are complicated. We can love someone and still hurt them. We can make terrible choices and still have genuine feelings. That's not love. Love doesn't lie. You're right. Real love doesn't lie. But infatuation does. Selfishness does. Fear does. And your father was all of those things." Emma was crying now, angry tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. "Everyone keeps telling me he loved me. My mom, my grandmother, even you. But how can that be true when everything about my life was based on his lies?" I moved to sit next to her on the sofa. "Can I tell you something about your father?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. William Hayes was a man who wanted to be loved without doing the work of being honest. He wanted the feeling of being a hero, the devoted father, the loving husband, the man everyone admired without the responsibility that comes with those roles. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "But Emma, I saw the photos in your house. I saw how he looked at you. That joy on his face when you were together, that was real. The time he spent with you, the love he showed you, that was the best part of him. The part that wasn't tangled up in lies and selfish choices. How do I know what was real and what was fake? You don't, not completely. But here's what I know. You're real. Your feelings are real. The memories you have of the times he made you laugh or helped you with homework or showed up for your school plays, those experiences were real for you, even if the context was built on lies." Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she held out the box she'd been clutching. "I brought you this. I don't know if you want it, but I thought you should have it." I opened the box carefully. Inside was a photograph in a simple frame. William, much younger, maybe 40 years old, standing in front of a lake, smiling at the camera. "I found it in his things at our house. On the back it says Lake Morrison, 1995. My mom said that's the year before I was born. Before everything. I turned the photo over. In William's handwriting, Lake Morrison, summer 1995. Thinking about new beginnings, 1995. The year before William's affair with Sarah began. He would have been 43, still married to me, still the man I thought I knew. Why are you giving this to me? Because it's before he became the person who lied to all of us. I thought, maybe you'd want to remember him when he was just your husband. Before Sarah. Before me. Before everything got complicated. The gesture was so thoughtful, so mature for a 16-year-old that I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you, Emma. This is very kind. I'm not kind. I'm angry. But her voice had lost its edge. I'm angry at him for lying. I'm angry at my mom for knowing he was married and not caring. I'm angry at you for existing and making everything complicated. I'm just angry all the time. That's okay. Anger is part of healing. My mom says I should forgive him, that holding on to anger will only hurt me. But how do I forgive someone for building my whole life on a lie? I set the photo down carefully. Emma, can I tell you what I've learned in the past 6 months? She nodded. Forgiveness isn't about saying what someone did was okay. It's about refusing to let their choices define the rest of your life. Your father made terrible decisions, but those decisions don't have to determine who you become. I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I was Emma Bennett, daughter of William and Sarah, but William wasn't really mine, and Bennett isn't even my mom's real name. So who am I? You're Emma. That's enough. You're a 16-year-old girl who loves dance and baking cookies for school fundraisers and has your father's eyes and your mother's kind heart. Those things are true regardless of the lies that surrounded you. Emma looked at me with those eyes, William's eyes, and I saw something shift in her expression. A small softening. My mom says you're being really nice to us, that you could have taken our house but you didn't, that you're letting us stay even though legally you could make us leave. Your mother made mistakes but you didn't, and taking away your home wouldn't give me back what I lost. It would just create more pain. I don't understand you. Emma's voice was puzzled. If someone lied to me the way my dad lied to you, I'd want to destroy them, but you're being kind. Maybe when you're older you'll understand. Sometimes the greatest power comes from choosing not to use all the power you have. I could destroy your life, Emma, but what would that accomplish? It wouldn't make me feel better. It wouldn't bring back the years I lost. It would just hurt an innocent girl who's already been hurt enough. Emma was crying again, but softer now. Grief instead of anger. I miss him. I know I shouldn't after everything he did. But I miss my dad. Of course you do. And that's okay. You can miss him and still be angry at him. You can love the father you thought you had while grieving the truth about who he really was. Those feelings don't cancel each other out. She wiped her eyes. Mrs. Hayes, can I ask you something? Call me Eleanor. And yes. Do you hate me? The question caught me off guard. Hate you? Why would I hate you? Because I'm proof of what my dad did. Every time you look at me, you must see his betrayal. I took her hand, surprised when she didn't pull away. Emma, when I look at you, I see a young woman who's been hurt by the same man who hurt me. I see someone who's trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. I see someone who's innocent in all this. I don't hate you. I actually admire you. Admire me. You came here today. That took courage. You brought me a photo because you thought it would help me remember better times. That took compassion. You're hurting, but you're still thinking about other people. That's admirable. Emma squeezed my hand. Thank you. For being kind to my mom. For letting us keep our house. For not hating me. You're welcome. And Emma, if you ever need to talk about your father, or anything else, you can call me. I may be the last person you want advice from, but I'm someone who understands what it's like to discover the person you loved wasn't who you thought they were. After Emma left, I sat holding the photograph she'd brought me. William at 43, standing by the lake, smiling at the camera. Thinking about new beginnings. What had he been thinking about that day? Was he already planning his affair with Sarah? Or was this before, when he was still the man I'd married, before he'd become the man who could live 2 lives I'd never know? But I realized something important as I looked at that photo. I didn't want to remember William this way, young and smiling and full of possibility. Because that William had made choices that led to the William who'd betrayed me. They were the same person. I put the photo in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd want to look at it, to remember the good years before everything fell apart. But not yet. For now, I needed to focus on moving forward. Chapter 12. New Beginnings. 8 months after William's death, I did something I'd been putting off. I went on a date. His name was Thomas Walker, and I'd met him at the grief support group my friend Carol had convinced me to attend. He was 68, recently widowed after 35 years of marriage to a woman who'd died of cancer. Unlike me, Thomas spoke of his late wife with uncomplicated love. There were no hidden betrayals, no secret families, just 35 years of genuine partnership that had ended too soon. She was my best friend, he'd said during one of our group sessions. We had our disagreements, sure, but I always knew she had my back, and she knew I had hers. That's what marriage is supposed to be, isn't it? Two people facing life together instead of alone. His words had made me realize how much I'd missed in my own marriage. William and I had never been partners. I'd been his support system, his caretaker, his cover story. But he'd never had my back. Thomas had asked me to dinner after a group session, casual and friendly. Just coffee if you're not ready for anything more. No pressure. I'd said yes before I could talk myself out of it. Now, sitting across from him at a quiet Italian restaurant, I felt nervous in a way I hadn't felt in decades. "You look nice," Thomas said, smiling. "But you also look terrified. We can leave if you want. I won't be offended." "I'm not terrified. It's been 43 years since I went on a date with anyone but William. Technically, this isn't a date. It's two friends having dinner. Less pressure that way." I laughed, feeling some of my nervousness ease. "Two friends having dinner. I can do that." We ordered food and talked about safe topics. His grandchildren. My volunteer work at the library. The book club we were both thinking about joining. But eventually, inevitably, the conversation turned to more serious matters. "Can I ask you something personal?" Thomas set down his wine glass, his expression thoughtful. "Of course." "Your husband, the one who had the secret family. Are you angry at him?" I thought about that question. Was I angry? I was. For months I was so angry I could barely breathe. Every time I thought about him, about the 16 years of lies, I wanted to scream. And now I'm sad. Not for me, but for him. Because he spent 43 years of his life maintaining lies. That must have been exhausting. And lonely in a way. He could never fully be himself with anyone, because everyone only knew part of the truth. Thomas nodded slowly. That's a very generous way to look at it. I don't know if it's generous or if I'm just tired of being angry. Anger takes so much energy, and I want to spend my energy on other things now. Like what? Like rebuilding relationships with people who matter. Like figuring out who I am when I'm not someone's wife or someone's mother. Like learning to trust again. Thomas reached across the table and took my hand. The gesture was simple, but it made my heart race. "Eleanor, can I tell you what I admire most about you?" "What's that?" "You didn't let them turn you bitter. You got angry. You fought for what was yours. But you didn't let it poison you. You chose to move forward instead of staying stuck in the past. Some days that feels like the hardest thing I've ever done. The best things usually are." We talked for hours, long after our plates had been cleared and the restaurant had started to empty. Thomas told me about his wife's battle with cancer, about holding her hand as she died, about the grief that still hit him at unexpected moments. "But I'm learning to live with it," he said. "The grief doesn't go away, but it changes. It becomes part of who you are instead of the only thing you are. I think that's where I'm trying to get to, where the betrayal is something that happened to me, not the defining feature of my life." "You'll get there. You're already further along than you think." As Thomas walked me to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone trying to hold on to a failing marriage, but the quiet hope of someone ready to start a new chapter. "Can I see you again?" Thomas asked. "Maybe actually call it a date next time." "I'd like that." He kissed my cheek, gentle and respectful, and I drove home with a smile on my face. Chapter 13. 1 year later, 1 year to the day after William's death, I woke up in my bedroom now decorated exactly as I wanted it, and felt at peace for the first time in months. The house was quiet, but it was a comfortable quiet. Not the oppressive silence of grief, but the peaceful silence of a woman content in her own space. I made coffee and carried it to the reading room, the space that had once been William's office. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the bookshelves I'd filled with novels I'd always wanted to read, but never had time for. On my desk was a letter that had arrived yesterday. From Sarah. I'd debated whether to open it. We'd maintained a cordial but distant relationship over the past year, speaking only when necessary about the settlement payments or legal matters. But curiosity won out. Dear Eleanor, I'm not sure if you want to hear from me, but I felt I owed you this. After our last conversation, I started seeing a therapist. For the first time in my life, I'm confronting the truth about my choices. I spent 16 years loving a version of William that didn't exist. But worse, I spent those years knowing he was married and telling myself it didn't matter. That I deserved him because I loved him more than you did. I was wrong about everything. I've cleaned out William's belongings from the house. No more shrine to a perfect love. Emma and I are learning to live with reality instead of fantasy. Last week I told Emma about you. About how you found out. About how you could have destroyed us but chose not to. She wanted to meet you to thank you. I hope that's okay. I also wanted you to know that I'm dating someone. His name is Peter, and he's a teacher at Emma's school. He's kind and patient, and most importantly, completely honest. When he talks about his divorce, he doesn't make excuses or blame his ex-wife. He takes responsibility for his part in their failure. It's strange being with someone who tells the truth. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the lie to be revealed. But Peter says I need to learn to trust again. That not every man is William. I think he's right. Thank you, Eleanor, for showing me the truth about William, for giving Emma and me a chance to start over, for being strong enough to choose justice over revenge. You didn't owe us kindness, but you gave it anyway. I hope someday I can be half as graceful in the face of betrayal as you've been. Sarah. I set the letter down, surprised to find tears on my cheeks. Happy tears for once. Sarah was moving forward. Emma was healing. Daniel was slowly rebuilding his relationship with me, showing up for family dinners and letting me spend time with Connor. Everyone was moving forward. The doorbell rang. Thomas right on time. We'd been seeing each other for 6 months now, slow and careful building trust, one honest conversation at a time. He'd been patient with my fears, understanding when I needed space present, when I needed comfort. Last week, he'd asked me to go away with him for a weekend. Nothing scandalous, just a trip to the coast, separate hotel rooms, time to see if we could be more than friends who had dinner once a week. I'd said yes. Ready for our adventure. Thomas stood on my porch, holding 2 travel mugs of coffee and wearing a smile that made my heart skip. Ready. As I locked my door and followed Thomas to his car, I thought about all the things that had happened in the past year. The betrayal, the anger, the grief, the slowly learned lessons about truth and forgiveness and moving forward. William had tried to write my ending. He'd planned for me to spend my final years in poverty and isolation, forgotten by the people I'd loved. He'd been wrong. I was 68 years old, and I was just beginning to understand myself, beginning to trust again, beginning to build a life that was entirely my own, not defined by anyone else's choices. As we drove toward the coast, Thomas reached over and took my hand. What are you thinking about? New beginnings, I said. And second chances, and how sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best thing. That's very philosophical. I've had a year to think about it. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, watching the landscape change from suburban sprawl to rolling hills to the first glimpses of ocean. Eleanor, I know we agreed to take things slow, and I'm not trying to rush anything, but I want you to know something. My heart started beating faster. What's that? I'm not William. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to make promises I can't keep. If there comes a day when this relationship doesn't work for one of us, we'll talk about it honestly. No secrets, no hidden lives, just honesty even when it's hard. Tears pricked my eyes again. I know you're not William. That's why I'm here. Good. Because you deserve someone who sees you. Really sees you. Not as a convenience or a cover story or someone to take care of them. But as a partner. I'm still learning how to be a partner. How to trust that someone won't use my trust against me. Then we'll learn together. Epilogue. The Garden. 18 months after William's death, I stood in my garden, the one I'd let die after his funeral, the one I'd thought I'd never have the heart to tend again. But spring had come, and with it the urge to create something beautiful. I'd spent the past month replanting. New roses, new perennials, a vegetable garden in the back corner. Everything chosen by me, planted by me, nurtured by me. No input from William, no criticism about my choices, just my garden exactly as I wanted it. Emma had helped me plant the roses. She came by every few weeks now, usually after her therapy appointments. We'd developed an unlikely friendship, two women hurt by the same man finding healing in each other's honesty. "My therapist says I'm using you as a substitute grandmother," Emma had said last week, digging a hole for a rose bush, "since I never really knew my real grandparents. What do you think?" "I think she's probably right, but I also think you're good at being a grandmother. You listen without judging. You tell me hard truths without being mean. You show me what it looks like to survive betrayal and come out stronger." Those are very grown-up observations for a 17-year-old. Yeah, well, having your whole life revealed as a lie makes you grow up fast. Now, 18 months later, those roses were blooming. Deep red and soft pink and sunny yellow, beautiful and alive, and proof that something good could grow from ashes. Thomas came out of the house carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. He'd been spending more and more time here, his presence comfortable and undemanding. "It's beautiful," he said, handing me a glass. "You've worked a miracle out here." "Not a miracle, just patience and determination and a lot of fertilizer," he laughed. "Still, it's impressive. You took something dead and made it live again." We sat on the garden bench purchased with money from my own accounts, not shared with William, and watched the afternoon sun filter through the oak trees. "Eleanor, can I ask you something?" "You know you can ask me anything." "Do you ever regret it? Fighting for what was yours, confronting Sarah, all of it. Would it have been easier to just let it go?" I thought about that question. Would it have been easier? Probably, but easier isn't always better. If I'd let it go, I'd still be living in William's lies, still believing the story he wanted me to believe, still defining myself by his choices instead of my own. And now I'm free. Free from lies. Free from the need to make everyone comfortable at my own expense. Free to build whatever life I want. Thomas took my hand. "And what kind of life do you want?" I looked at my garden blooming in the afternoon light, at my house redecorated to reflect my taste, at this man beside me, honest and kind and patient. "One that's real," I said finally. "One built on truth instead of lies. One where I'm seen and valued for who I actually am, not who someone needs me to be." "That sounds like a good life." "It is. It's a very good life." We sat in comfortable silence watching the sunset over my garden. In the distance I could hear children playing. Life continuing, moving forward. William Hayes had tried to write my story. He'd cast me as the wife who didn't understand him, the woman who deserved to be left behind, the old woman who could be discarded when he found something better. But that wasn't my story. My story was about a woman who'd discovered the truth and refused to let it destroy her, who'd fought for justice without seeking revenge, who'd learned that the greatest power sometimes comes from choosing kindness when you could choose cruelty. My story was about new beginnings at 68, about learning that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be, about understanding that betrayal doesn't have to be the end, it can be the beginning of something better. William had lived a double life, but I'd discovered my real life, and I was just getting started. Thomas squeezed my hand. "What are you smiling about?" "I'm thinking about how William spent years planning a future he never got to see. And now I'm living a future he never imagined for me. One where I'm happy, where I'm valued, where I'm free." "That's the best revenge, isn't it? Living well." "It's not revenge," I corrected gently. "It's justice, and healing, and proof that sometimes the worst betrayal can lead you to your best life." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. New colors for a new life. And in my garden planted with my own hands, blooming with my own choices. The roses nodded in the evening breeze, as if agreeing with every word. The end. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.